The Happy Warrior Podcast, conservative commentary on the news of the day from a more positive perspective.
The year of 2018 marks the 200th anniversary of a man probably responsible for more violence, more deaths, and more tragedy than any other man in history since the father of murder, Cain, invented it. It is estimated that due to this man and his philosophy, that at least 100 million people died during the 20th century that otherwise should have lived. In Stalin's Russia alone, 8 to 61 million died. In the Ukraine, it is known that at least 10 million died, with a further 6.1 million birth defects. China, with Mao, killed 77 million. In the killing fields of Cambodia, it's estimated 2.5 million died. And sadly, due to events that the United States was partly consequence to, in Vietnam it is unknown how many died due to the evils of communism and fascism. It is estimated that 3.8 million people died. 1.25 million of those were murdered. And in this total, I haven't even shared with you the estimates for North Korea or smaller countries like Romania. So you can see that when it is estimated that during the 20th century that 100 million people died due to socialist and communist governments, you know that that is a lowball estimate. Even still at that low figure of 100 million deaths, that still outpaces the combined total of killings due to World War I and World War II. I hope that all of you were taught in public school about the evils of the Nazi regime under Hitler. I hope you were taught that under the Holocaust, as many as perhaps 20 million Jews, political dissidents, gypsies, and others were killed in concentration camps and elsewhere. I hope we were all taught the words never again and wrote into our hearts that we would never allow another tragedy like the Holocaust to come upon the face of this earth, not as long as we had anything to do with it. And yet, most of the deaths that I've shared with you today so far happened after World War II. Indeed, even now, deaths are taking place in countries across the world, many of which tout this man as their philosophical leader and founder of their great state. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you have been educated well enough to know that the man I'm talking about, who was born on May 5th, 1818, yes, I am talking about the new father of murder, even the very famous Karl Marx. So as I talk to you today and share these news stories and concerns that I have, I want you to keep in mind this man and his vision and how he is regarded today by our contemporaries here in the very United States and elsewhere in the Western world. Indeed, I would go so far as saying that the number one person that could be blamed for the world's greatest problems is indeed Karl Marx and his philosophy of death. Welcome to the Happy Warrior program. I'm your host, Peter Pischke.
If I were the devil, if I were the prince of darkness, I'd want to engulf the whole world in darkness, and I'd have a third of its real estate and 4/5 of its population, but I wouldn't be happy until I had seized the ripest apple on the tree, thee. So I'd set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first. I'd begin with a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of a serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, do as you please. To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. I would confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square. And the old, I would teach to pray after me, Our Father, which art in Washington. And then I'd get organized. I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd threaten TV with dirtier movies and vice versa. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could. I'd sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I'd tranquilize the rest with pills. If I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves, until each in its turn was consumed. And with promises of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flames. If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellects, but neglect to discipline emotions. Just let those run wild. Until before you knew it, you'd have to have drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors at every schoolhouse door. Within a decade, I'd have prisons overflowing. I'd have judges promoting pornography. Soon I could evict God from the courthouse, then from the schoolhouse, and then from the houses of Congress. And in his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion and deify science. I would lure priests and pastors into misusing boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I'd make the symbol of Easter an egg and the symbol of Christmas a bottle. If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who wanted until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious. And what'll you bet? I couldn't get whole states to promote gambling as the way to get rich. I would caution against extremes in hard work, in patriotism, in moral conduct. I would convince the young that marriage is old-fashioned, that swinging is more fun, that what you see on TV is the way to be. And thus I could undress you in public, and I could lure you into bed with diseases for which there is no cure. In other words, if I were the devil, I'd just keep right on doing what he's doing.
That was the immaculate and awesome Paul Harvey. That is one of my favorite pieces of radio all time, probably my favorite radio monologue. Paul Harvey wrote that in 1965, and his wisdom there that he shares, it seems more true now than it ever has before. It seems to me like sometimes that the devil seems to be leading our country more these days than bright minds and reason, and even a heavenly Father who looks at us lovingly and just wants to give us guidance to show us the way so that we can be happy and do good. I bring this bit up as I think about the legacy of Karl Marx and socialism. A wonderful op-ed, well, wonderful's not quite the right word, but it was written in the Washington Times by L. Todd Wood, and I'll just read the points off, and you think about how true that is, what's going on now, and you think about Paul Harvey's message. I would destroy the religious ideals that built the country and held it together, allowing it to thrive and be exceptional. In short, I would destroy Christianity in the West. His second point is, I would destroy the family, the fabric of society. Isn't that true? I would tear apart the nuclear family that produced stable children, future contributors to the nation's wealth and power. He goes on to say that I would promote a gay agenda that would target fertility and subsequent lowering of the birth rate, make children not know what gender they were. I would confuse them. I would destroy centuries-old family units that produced generations of America, became the most powerful nation on earth. A society that does not reproduce is a dying society. I think those 2 points go together. Think about now how families are revered. I've read articles to you about how it's looked at that the traditional dad, the dad that takes care of the family, brings back the bacon, is involved in their kid's life. That's not just any kind of dad. That's only one kind of dad. And we need not to discourage those other kinds of dads, the ones we might call deadbeats, the ones that we call not allowed to be involved in the raising and rearing of the child. The family unit is being attacked more and more than ever and ever. One of Karl Marx, that's a big thing of socialism and Marxism, is that the family unit is unfit and that children should be taken care of the proverbial village. Remember, that's an old Hillary Clinton quote. Child be taken care of by the village. The families are unfit to do it. They give their kids the wrong ideals of society. Karl Marx said that we should instead have the community raise the kids. The kids are inculcated with the right views. Think about that, how today. How often are our kids being stuck in daycare? How often are our kids receiving their only teaching and values from the schools that they attend? When your kid goes off to college, ask yourself, have you taught them well enough that everything they're going to learn at school won't just override that? Howard's third point is toxic masculinity and extremist feminism. Isn't that true? Even says, what a better way to make society less masculine, less able to feel a strong military? That's a solid point. 4 is I would destroy the education system. I would plant Marxist professors throughout the university system, teaching new generations nothing about American history, but filling their heads full of communist propaganda. He says that students now know nothing of Washington, Lincoln, Jefferson. They only know of Malcolm X and Lenin. Actually, I'm not sure they know even that much about Malcolm X and Lenin. He talks about dividing the races. You know, President Barack Obama, to me, should have been the great healer. He should have been MLK Jr. Part 2. Instead, he was the great divider. He didn't defend the cops. Instead, he defended Black Lives Matter and said the cops were, guilty. He said his grandma that had raised him, his grandma, who had raised him, the one that stood by his side, when his mom left him, Guess who stayed by him? His grandparents. Here's what our president said about his grandma. She said that she was a typical white person who had fears about black men. I personally feel that President Barack Obama has taken race relations in this country back 30 years or more. And I fear for the future and how we're going to heal that great divide. Howard goes on, I would corrupt the federal government. I would fill intelligence and security services with traitors to the nation founding. 7, I would take away the population's means to defend itself, meaning guns. 8, I would destroy self-reliance and ingenuity by making over half the population dependent on the government, unable to take care of themselves. Yeah, that's true, isn't it? There are very few of us these days that don't suck at the government's teat in some way or another. 9, I would use big tech to completely remove any viewpoints or ideas that are associated with the old America. I would ban them from the internet. Heck, I'd take over the internet. Oh man, I have some big stories. That's one of the reasons I was so slow to get this episode out, was I had so many stories regarding this issue, and I'll talk about later in the episode. I would corrupt the nation's leadership with money, finding those who would sell the country for pieces of silver. I would promote the disrespect to the nation's symbols. I would have people kneel during the national anthem, burn the flag, tear down statues of our nation's history. I would make people hate the very fabric of the nation that gave them such wealth and power. 12, this is the final point. I would find a straw man, a country who is also a malicious adversary to America, though much less powerful. I would focus all the negative energy and recriminations toward this straw man country. In this manner, the targeted nation would be ignorant of my true intentions. This is a wonderful editorial, essay. I don't know. You can call it what you want. How to Destroy a Nation by L. Todd Wood. You can find it in the outline. It was published by the Washington Times. It is like the modern version of that Paul Harvey monologue I shared with you. Think about how crazy our nation is these days. If you even went back 2 years, could you believe the stuff that is going on today? That there are no longer men and women? That being a man and have manly tendencies makes you toxic and a threat to others and yourself. And trust in the government is at an all-time low. Even agencies that we, all Americans, used to think that were our heroes, our leaders in law enforcement and could be trusted. Look what happened. A bombshell report came out, and it says that the FBI never examined the vast majority of emails on Anthony Weiner's laptop, despite Comey's claims. Comey had said that Hillary was in the clear and that she had done nothing wrong, when in fact he had stopped the total investigation and prevented most of the email material to go to any investigators. And that only speaks for the lack of trust on the right for the FBI and the CIA and other intelligence agencies. I mean, the left has treated cops in a pretty harsh light for a long time, so both sides of this nation don't think that highly of law enforcement. Now, we all want to believe that this is just a state of chaos, this is just one time in our nation's history, and eventually things will cool down, maybe by the time we get into the president's next term, or the guy or gal that comes after that. And I would like to say that I pray that it is that way. I pray that I am wrong, and I am not seeing the horizon correctly. But I look at some of the rhetoric coming from Antifa and people on the left, and that the support that Antifa receives, instead of being condemned for their violence, for their vitriol, for their destruction and absolute lawlessness, instead Antifa is being supported by the media and by Democrat politicians and others on the left. I have a compilation video from the Washington Free Beacon. This might be a little NSFW, so if you're listening to this and you have kids around, turn the volume down. But it's important that you hear some of the rhetoric coming from Antifa these days.
It's basically like the typical day at the White House. In your face, Trump, suck it.
If you see anybody from that cabinet, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome.
If he says, jump off the Harahan Bridge, she'll jump off the Harahan Bridge. I wish he'd say that.
What you do? Donald Trump showed up after murder him?
Yeah, it says I would murder him for the people. We gotta take him down.
If it came down to it and it was a group effort, we'd have to do him like Gaddafi.
Representatives for Senator John Tester say they do not condone a Pearl Jam concert poster depicting a burning White House and a dead President Donald Trump.
A crisis is if Donald Trump falls into the Potomac River and can't swim. And he says, and a catastrophe is anybody saves his ass.
If he's my
just rounding people up and murdering them without any, due process. He certainly liked you.
Anyway.
I don't think you can say that definitively. How do you resist the temptation to run up and wring her neck?
We love our country, but we
effing hate Trump.
I'm going to say one thing. Trump.
Yeah, if you couldn't tell, there were people in there at one of these Antifa protests that actually said that if they saw Trump, they would kill him. That's right, they advocated murdering the president. And the media does not report it. They do not push these things. We're not going to get a report to see if any of these guys get investigated by the Secret Service. We don't get any reports from the media saying, hey guys, watch the rhetoric. We are not going to advocate the killing of leaders. This is a first world nation. We're the United States of America. We set the example for the rest of the world for peaceful transfer of law and authority. We do not murder our sitting leaders. Full stop. You know, David Hogg is one of these leaders, and I don't want to get into how I perceive this guy as probably being one of those kids that would bully other kids in high school. You know, the ones that always seem to get all the attention, but in reality are the meanest jerks to have ever breathed. Anyhow, David Hogg kind of comes off that way to me, but that's besides the point. So David Hogg, I'll just read this article and let David Hogg speak for himself. He said, firstly, that the NRA is a pathetic effort that want to keep killing our children. He added that they could have the blood of murdered children on their faces, but they wouldn't do anything because they are somehow greedy. He said, also talking about pro-gun politicians, he said, it just makes me sick. No, it just makes me think what sick effers are out there that want to continue to sell more guns, murder more children, and honestly just get reelected. What kind of SE person does that? They could have blood from children spattered all over their faces, and they wouldn't take action because all they see is dollar signs. And he said he wants to make sure those efforts aren't getting reelected. On the other part of the note, from the same interview, this is the one where Hogg went and said that Pelosi was old, or too old to be in government. How did he put it? I have it here. Older Democrats just won't move the F off the plate unless take control. Nancy Pelosi is old. Hogg wants to run for Congress when he's 25. Holy crud, that is not, I mean, that would not end up good for the nation. At the very least, how could he hardly share any speeches up on the podium? I mean, he just cannot say a sentence without dropping an F-bomb. So you tell me, guys, if the rhetoric from the armies, and I have a story about the armies of Antifa, are violent and crude and willing to commit acts, even felonies, if they think it justifies their mission of righteousness, and their leader basically spouts the same, how do you think this is going to turn out? When I shared with you those countries in my opening monologue, China, Vietnam, North Korea, the Soviet Union, how did that turn out? Parts of Antifa are getting really dangerous, people. Please pay attention, wake up, maybe tell your friends and family about this. I have two official Antifa groups in this country from major cities that are advocating starting their own violent revolutionary armies. The first store I have is called Red Guards Austin. It's a self-proclaimed Marxist, Leninist, Maoist, violent Antifa group. It is advocating for the formation of a Red Army. Let's read a little bit what they said. We encourage the formation of paramilitary organizations on two levels. The first being those who are mainly unarmed, but are prepared and trained to carry out fist fighting or using blunt weapons like axe handles or flagpoles, as well as shields and basic armoring. The second level is the more advanced embryo of a Red Army, which is trained military and operates as soldiers all the time, engaging in production and mass work among the proletariat and the oppressed people's nations. They go on, it is time for Austin to stand up, to shake off bad leadership, trying to pose itself on anti-fascism, come together under a better model of actual resistance and not token performance. When we organize and lead actions, the fascists do not march. Every step they take is met with physical confrontation, and they are bombarded from on all sides. And here's the frosting on the nasty Leninist cake. On the basis of our principled United Front work, fascists and their collaborators can be drowned out, run out, routed, beaten bloody, and even annihilated. I'll read that again. Their collaborators can be drowned out, run out, routed, beaten bloody, and even annihilated. These are our principles, and we aim to hold them to the very finish. The second group I have is from Los Angeles. It's a Los Angeles-based Antifa group called Serve the People. Los Angeles, it's STPLA. Stopla. Same thing. It's advocating the exact same thing. When they had a rally, they wore red bandanas, carried their Stopla flags, banners, and a Trump piñata effigy. During their protest against Trump, which I don't speak Spanish, but that's okay because it's pretty NSFW what they said. They also called for, according to the report, militant escalations. This is what they said at the demonstration. And for the defense of their undocumented working-class immigrant communities by any means necessary. They are recommending here. Oh, I'll just read what the news service says. Organizers of masses lit road flares, delivered speeches to news cameras and onlookers, calling on the release of Gladys, calling an end to all text and undocumented working-class immigrants, calling on organized Unidades de Defensa Populares Revolutionaries, which is the People's Revolutionary Defense Units, that sounds peaceful, and using revolutionary violence against the enemies of the people. The vicious far left is not calming down. The vicious far left, Antifa, whatever you want to call them, are not coming down. Their leaders, their icons, their thinkers are not telling them to calm down. The media ratchets it up every day about how evil and totalitarian President Trump is. Not to say that President Trump doesn't do things sometimes that may be a little bit totalitarian, but it doesn't matter because the truth is hidden. They just equate President Trump as far as they can to hail Hitler and then just leave it there. And they don't allow much criticism. They don't allow much alternate reporting. So do you think things are going to calm down on that side of the country? Now, there are Democrats, there are people on the left that love this country, that do not want to do violence. They're educated and know better. But their voices are not being heard. Their voices are not being magnified. I'm telling you guys, this is a dangerous situation. I can only read the news, analyze it, and share what I think this all means. So please, keep your eyes on the road, keep paying attention, keep in your prayers that cooler heads will prevail. When you meet someone that is this way, try to reason with them, even if it seems impossible, even if it might even seem dangerous. We have got to cool these people off. If people on the right were getting like this, I would say the exact same thing. We do not want violence in this country. We do not want violent civil unrest. When MLK Jr. led the many blacks, whites, and others in the South, when they had the civil distance, what did they do? Did they attack? When they were attacked, when they had dogs set on them, when they were beaten, when they were hit with water hoses, did you tell them, get him, get him, it's justified, they're wrong, we're in the right, get him? No. MLK Jr. did not say that. He advocated strongly for peace. That is why MLK Jr. is one of my heroes and one of the many heroes of many, many Americans. MLK Jr. wasn't perfect. There are things that I disagree with him on. But in this, by setting peace, by setting a precedent of peaceful dissidence, he became one of the new fathers of our nation. I beg you guys, if any of you on the left has managed to hear this, or a family member to talk to you about it, I beg you, please calm down, use reason. We do not want violence. We are the United States of America, and we are better than this. Now, let's move to some happy stories. This is the Happy Warrior. Let's have some happy stories. Well, happy-ish stories. So, the rhetoric on the left is so crazy. There is about nothing that people on the right or the Trump family can do. If you just have the last name Trump, that's a sin unto itself. You should be ashamed of yourself. You should change your name and go into hiding. So, I have a story about Lara Trump. Anyhow, you pronounce it the way you want. She is the wife of President Donald Trump's son, Eric. She's an animal activist. Now, animal activists, do you think you find more animal activists on the left or the right? At least, what's the general media image? The general media image is, of course, on the left. So you think that the left would be for this, what she was doing. She posted a photo on Instagram that was designated to motivate her social media followers to clear the shelters. And she meant clear the shelters by adopting a cat or a dog from a local rescue. Guess how that went? It went crazy. People freaked out online. They put pictures of cages. And how could you do that? People are stuck in cages. It's crazy. I like what Trump wrote. So Laura said, imagine if this was your view. Day in and day out, people would come by and stand in front of your cage and stare at you. They would tell you to shh if you barked. They would laugh if you ran around frantically. Some would cry if you looked sad. Imagine people reading the info on your cage, just moving on. Imagine being on display like furniture in a storefront. Can you imagine? That's a great point by Laura Trump. I love dogs too. The thought of dogs being hurt, that gets to me. I do not like that. Let's save the animals. Let's get them out of the shelters, guys. Well, the resistance did not take this well. They said that she was complicit in her father-in-law's immigration policies. She is not in any way. She has no control over her father-in-law. His own chief of staff has little control over her father-in-law. Nonetheless, her his daughter-in-law. They said that she was complicit in putting children in cages, just like the one Laura Trump depicted in her Instagram post. She couldn't even do that. We could go into the cages thing, but everyone's talked about the cages thing. I want to go more in the flippin' cages that was set by the Obama administration and the only got changed under the Trump administration. And the only one that really seemed to care about those kids were people during the Obama administration, not part of the government. A lot of right-wing people. Glenn Beck, at the time, did something very controversial. It was during the Obama administration, and he brought a couple $1 million worth of charity and toys and food and stuff to those kids when the kids really were in cages physically. Now, this year they weren't in cages anymore. They had a pretty nice setup. It was like a nice modern daycare, essentially. Is it good that they separate families? No, but it wasn't nearly as bad as it used to be under the Obama administration. I know that sounds a little bit about whataboutism, but that point never gets said, and I just want to bring it up. Now, other dog news, I have this great story from Reason.com, and it starts with, "They're good dogs, Brent." Of course, that's an old meme. It's funny. It talks about these TSA dogs that they did not pass. I remember when I did swimming lessons, and many years I would not pass. I didn't have the strength, the stamina. I couldn't dive like they wanted me to. I don't know. Maybe my dolphin kick wasn't dolphin-y enough. So I know what it feels like to not make the cut. Well, these poor little puppies, these poor little TSA dogs did not make the cut. They failed their police canine training. I love this sentence. They failed canine training, Transportation Security Administration terrorist sniffing class, and other puppers on patrol programs. They said some of these pups are too nervous, some are just too doggone nice, and others are more interested in snugs than drugs. Oh man, that's awesome. I love this picture. It says CTV News, this is from Twitter, Gavel the dog fired for being too nice. Anyhow, the TSA does have a dog adoption program, so these pups will probably get a home. I thought it was a funny story. Another great story I have is about this pug. He is, well, I don't know, we'll try the news story and hear how it goes.
Well, in Berlin on Saturday, there was a different type of race. This one with pugs. Yes, 60 dogs competed for the title of Berlin's fastest pug. The front runner, there she is, 4.5-year-old Emma, the winner of the 2016 and 2017 defended her title once again.
There's a lady chasing her.
Under, I would imagine,
she's chasing a lady.
After her owner. She runs pretty fast, too. Her competitors needed up to 40 seconds for the 15-meter race. Some getting a bit distracted.
Pugs everywhere.
Maybe just maybe as athletic
1,
as Emma.
2, 3, 4,
in front of a cheering
5,
crowd, Emma received a medal, a trophy,
6.
and a pillow for her third win in
Wow,
Imola.
she is fast.
I think
She
if your
actually
owner
is
is
pretty
fast, that gives
fast.
you an advantage because then you chase after them faster.
There you go.
If your owner's running slow, you'll just kind of go slow behind the owner.
So cute. This one is like, oh, okay, doodle-doo-doo.
Yeah, I shared that story with my friend and co-host, producer, Robert Mehling, and he thought it was awesome. The dog is dubbed the Usain Bolt of pugs. It's Usain Bolt? Yeah, it's Usain Bolt of pugs. She was crowned the fastest of her breed after running a 50-meter race in just 6 seconds. This is her third straight title. Her name is Emma. She's a 4-year-old pug. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? I love that story. Okay, on to harder and less fun things, but more important. So one of the reasons it took me, I worked on this outline about probably off and on 2 weeks pretty solidly. I probably put 20 to 30 hours, maybe even as high as that, on it. One of the things was last week I was debating about South Africa. See, South Africa, you probably have heard in the news, is having white land taken from farmers and maybe or maybe not white genocide. I was having a hard time with my research figuring out the actual statistics and what the actual problems are, so I'm going to explain them to you as best as I understand it and try to give you the full honest picture and the full truth of the situation. So we should start with President Malema. President Malema is the president of South Africa right now. Now I'm going to play a clip of him talking, and you tell me if you think this is a reasonable man.
Why not Mashaba? Why not Soli and all of that? Because the mayor of DA in PE is a white man. So these people, when you want to hit them hard, go after a white man. They feel a terrible pain because you have touched a white man. Not because Mashaba and Soli will not be touched. They will be touched, don't worry. But we are starting with this whiteness. We are cutting the throat of whiteness.
Now, Malema said that about a opponent, Mayor Trollop. I don't really know the situation there, but doesn't that monologue, his speech there, say how reasonable he is? And hear that crowd was going crazy for his comments. They were licking it and loving it. They wanted more of it. Yeah, let's cut the throat of the white man. Yeah! Scary. I mean, I talked about ratcheted up rhetoric. Fever's running high earlier. I mean, that is what's going on in South Africa right now. That is the underlying issue when we talk about South Africa, is that the culture there is really ramped up. Now, South Africa is a unique nation. They were the last of the Western nations to get rid of slavery, which is known as apartheid. That was less than 30 years ago. They have a population, being in Africa, that's 10-to-1 black to white. South Africa, despite being a Western world, has incredible, just sheer deprivation, sheer poverty, just a huge, huge poverty problem. I mean, you see those pictures of people that are living in cardboard boxes in sheet metal huts. That is South Africa. Currently, whites possess 72% of the farms versus 4% in the hands of the black population. 4/5 of the population is black. 4/5. To be honest, I don't think it should be a priority at all, the color of the person that owns the farm. I think it's more important what the farm does and the character of the person that owns it. But if you're worried about this land problem, making sure that blacks have more land, or at least land that's closer into ownership to the population statistics, you could go a couple of ways. The ways that I think of is, one, the capitalist route. Just wait. Over time, because there are more black people in this country, over time these farms will be sold off. Black people will own the farms. That was the plan that South Africa had instituted. That was the plan they were going with after apartheid ended. I think it's called willing seller, willing buyer. But here's the thing about willing seller, willing buyer. It is a bit slow. The people have to die off. The people have to want to sell their farms. And there has to be buyers. It's not just people that can sell, but there have to be people that are interested in agriculture and actually want to buy the farms. This isn't what South Africa is planning on doing now. South Africa has turned around. Last year they announced that they were going to make changes to the Constitution where they could just seize farms from white people and give it to black people. This is the warning of democracy that all the founders, every single one, gave us warning of. Democracy is simply 51% telling the other 49% what to do, and they taking their stuff if they want to. I mean, democracy is very dangerous in that sense. That's why we're a republic and not a democracy, because we have controls on that. Like, we have elected leadership, and we have some laws that were established in our Constitution that were supposed to move things around about how our leaders are elected. So we wouldn't be too elitist, but we wouldn't also be too populist. We'd be neither. We'd have a nice mix in the middle. South Africa is doing the Marxist democratic route. They are going to take the farms. They've even just made a change to their constitution where they can just take it without reciprocation. So the people that their farms get taken away, they don't even get paid. Now, in the United States, we have something called eminent domain. And that eminent domain, there is some fight against it. And eminent domain as a culture it does get misused at times. I'm not going to say that eminent domain does get misused, but we're not using it to just take farm from one person, give farm to the other person. And those of you that are Marxist or think I'm wrong, do you really think that blacks are going to receive these farms? No. I mean, their color might be black, but they're just going to be friends of those in power. That's what happens every time. What's what happens every single time. Remember, there was those that had more, some were more equal than others. You know that phrase? Well, that's what happens. They give it to their buddies. Certain people make rich. This is how we get oil Russian oligarchs. Oligarch? Anyhow, so we know for certain this is something that South Africa wants to do. There are at least 2 farms on record that have had this happen. They were given 10% or less of the value of the land and the properties. And of course, everything that I just mentioned has caused chaos. There are white farmers that are just trying to get out of the country and just can't. They offer to sell the farms and there's no buyers. So the last issue of contention on the South African issue is, so what about this white genocide I'm hearing about? And this one has really got me. I'm down with it. Want isn't the right word. I wanted to believe that these reports about white farmers being killed at a super high level is true. And it just really isn't. The numbers are up slightly, but they're not huge. And I'll talk about South Africa's crime problems in a little bit. But even Breitbart.com had a report that actually there is no evidence that this white genocide is happening. Now, we've seen white genocide in another country, Zimbabwe. They did the exact same thing. It was a colonist power that earned its own freedom. They elected corrupt people. And they decided to just expropriate and take all the land from the white people and kill them off that stayed and just make their lives living hell. And look how that turned out. Ever heard of a $1 billion Zimbabwe note? Yeah, that's the country that decided to basically destroy itself. Now, I'm not even going to touch the tweet that Trump made, and I'm glad he made it. I'm glad he instructed the Secretary of State Pompeo to closely study this issue, even though he said large-scale killing of farmers, which isn't accurate. The problem is, okay, so here are the 2 problems with finding these statistics. Number 1, we only have government statistics. Number 2, there's not a lot of reporters going on in the rural areas of South African country. At least to my understanding is if these attacks are happening, maybe they're not getting reported. And 3 is that police often just don't get involved in these disputes. A farmer might be attacked, his farm. There's a story, this terrible story. It's too hard to share here. Basically, their farm was set on fire. They die in the fire. They called for help from the police. The police decide not to come. So we don't know exactly of the reports. So to get a solid statistic on how many white people are being killed is hard. Now, that does not mean that there are necessarily white genocide going on. I want you to understand, white genocide may be going on, but we don't know. But there's no evidence to say that it is. So don't be going around telling them about the white genocide. Now, in this situation, with the culture so ramped up, with so much hatred from blacks to whites, and maybe in the reverse, this is looking like a situation where we will see white genocide. It's just not here quite yet. And Malema, I mean, he doubled down on this stuff about taking farms. He called Trump a pathological liar and blah, 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 blah. Now, South Africa, a population about 17 million, is not a paradise. South Africa, in many crime statistics, is one of the most dangerous countries in the world. It probably is the most dangerous Western or industrialized country in the world, which begs me to ask, why should we call it industrialized? In the crime statistics for rape alone, they are number 1 out of Scott, 94 countries. They're ahead of Costa Rica. They're ahead of Nicaragua. They're way ahead of the United States, Zimbabwe. I mean, they have the top amount of rape. I mean, there was a really sad story about, remember that Oprah Winfrey School? It was in South Africa. Guess what she got that university got in trouble for? Child and baby rape. Yes, South Africa is the world leader in child and baby rape. That is messed up. Oh, I was wrong on the population statistics. I'm seeing 44 million. I don't know what I read. I think that was for a town. But still, the rest of them are correct. I mean, come on. I have a story from 2015 that said that South Africa had a murder rate as nearly as high as 49 people being murdered a day. I mean, look at Africa is not really a safe place I necessarily want to send my sister to go visit. I don't think I'm alone in that feeling. I mean, we look at 6 of the 10 most dangerous cities in Africa are in South Africa, guys. They're in South Africa. Port Elizabeth, South Africa. Cape Town, South Africa. Durban, South Africa. Johannesburg, South Africa. What else I got? I can't pronounce that. Pietermaritzburg, South Africa. And the most dangerous is Rustenburg. Here, I'll read what it says here on World Atlas. Rustenburg City is in the northwest province of South Africa. It has very high crime levels and is rated as 85.71 out of possible crime score of 100. 85 out of score 100. Of all the cities in the northwest province, Rustenburg has the highest total case of criminal activities with 11,117 cases in 2015, according to Crime Statistics South Africa. Household burglary, kidnapping, hijack, and political violence are but some of the crimes that frequently occur in this city. According to South Africa Dialogue, street crimes and muggings are also high in Rustenburg, and caution is necessary each and every day. At night, car break-ins are common. It is not advisable to leave one's valuables inside a vehicle when driving on the freeways at night. Stop in undesignated areas, make one an easy target for robbers, and hence it's wise to avoid making them. You know what's also wise? Don't go to Rustenburg. I mean, wow, that is really bad. So it's not like South Africa is a paradise, people. The crime rate is insane. I mean, whew. I mean, it's sad when that country is making some of those South American countries look safe. I mean, that's nuts. That is nuts. That's nuts like bugs on your butts. That's a Adventure Time quote for you. So some of you have probably heard about this idea that we now have to call the vagina, the lady part, the tinkle dinker. No, just the tinkle. We had to call the tinkle now a front hole. This is silly. I don't know why we're calling it a front hole. That just sounds worse. Maybe it's because of my medical background that sounds stupid to me. But now we have to call it a front hole. I am not doing that, except in jest. That is silly. Look, I'm one of those people that are like, LGBT is enough. I don't need to add the IAPTQ+. Like, why even have a name if you're just going to have plus? That's like etc. Like this and then everything else. I think LGBT should be enough. And I just don't like the language control. I am a politically correct person in the sense that I don't use strong language. I'm kind to others. I try to live as a disciple of Jesus Christ. So the words I say usually aren't that extreme. That being said, I don't like being controlled. I don't like the thought police. I don't like the speech police. And word police, speech police is thought police. You control someone's words, you can control what they think, at least to some extent. That's the idea. Thank you, Karl Marx. The other hole I have is about a museum visitor who fell into a giant hole. It was painted with this special black paint, so you can't tell the depth of it. And so it just kept walking and walked into it. It was an 8-foot hole. I mean, wow. That's kind of awesome, actually. And lastly, I have this story about a dolphin, a sexually frustrated dolphin named Zafar, who terrorized tourists on a French beach. It is awesome. Here, I'll read some of this story. It's so funny. A seaside village in Brittany has banned swimming on its beach because a dolphin in heat has been scaring tourists and locals by approaching them and trying to rub up against them. The dolphin has even tried to prevent several swimmers from getting back to the beach at La de Venique, using its nose to push one woman out of the water and up into the air. The beast, often clearly in a state of arousal, also tries to rub up against kayaks and other small boats. The 3-meter-long dolphin, which locals have nicknamed Zafar, has been hanging around the Bay of Brest for months, amusing tourists with its antics as it visited the beaches and shorelines of Plougastel de Lua. And I can't say the other names. Children in sailing schools were delighted. This is my favorite part of the story. Children in sailing schools were delighted when the dolphin would suddenly turn up and frolic around their boats. And Zafar sometimes would let swimmers grip onto his dorsal fin and go for a ride with him. Oh, I love this part. But then, a few weeks ago, he changed. Man, that's awesome. I think the journalist was having funny there. And swimming and diving are banned on the village shoreline whenever the presence of the dolphin is confirmed, said a new bylaw issued last week by the mayor. You can't get within 50 meters of the dolphin. He told the local media he had issued the new rules to ensure people's safety. Several swimmers were frightened. He even lifted up a woman swimmer last Thursday with his, a nose. Local media have been awash with tales of the dolphin's less savory antics, with several going into some detail about being confronted with the animal's arousal. So this is kind of interesting. Dolphins can mate any time of the year. They do have recreational recreation. They're very large animals and could cause serious injury, even inadvertently with something like a flipper if they feel threatened. Oh my gosh, it's so awesome. See, I've been telling people for years that dolphins they're Satan's fish. The great Leviathan that comes from the ocean is just a really big dolphin. I don't need to go into dolphin studies and what certain people did with dolphins at the dolphin study, because this is a PG show. But man, that is an awesome story. I think that's great. Reminds me of the old King of the Hill episode. Same subject. It was awesome. You should look it up.
Your presence is requested at the royal wedding of Prince Giesbert of Bentwood and Princess Bean.
Do you take this man to be your husband? No! Oh my God. This is a bad time to be coming down off of that high.
So how'd it go?
I want to be in charge of my own destiny.
I want to see the outside world.
I want to get rid of all the diseases plaguing mankind and replace them with worse ones.
Bean, you're out of control. I don't even know what to yell at you.
I'm not so bad.
Well, you did kill that one guy.
I'd be fine if someone could just slide my head up a bit.
Isn't there a point in everyone's life where they need to go and figure out who they are? Whew, I'm a good butcher.
This is a pet shop.
What's this feeling I don't want to drink away?
That's hope.
I've got a bad idea.
What's bad about it? Oh, never mind. I see. I'm so proud of you.
All right, sorry, that was a trailer for Disenchantment. It's the Netflix series that came out not last week, the week before, August 17th. It's the newest Matt Groening series. He's the creator of The Simpsons and Futurama. I love Futurama. I'm not a big Simpsons fan, but Futurama is one of my very favorite animated comedies. It's so good. So I wanted to do something different. You know, I never do reviews. I thought I'd throw in an entertainment review. So I watched it a couple times. I watched it some with family members, and then I watched it by myself. People are ragging on it online because it's so different from the other two series. And I would just say that they are wrong. I think that it does it's a slow burn for Disenchantment to find its voice. But so if you just want to watch the good stuff, start in episode 6, watch that through the end. That's 4 or 5 episodes. It is awesome. The first couple of episodes, it takes a while for it to find its voice. One of the reasons is because this was written in a different style, and I think Matt Groening and his team are kind of adjusting to that. This is more the drama first, then you build the jokes around that instead of the jokes, and then you build the drama around that. You know, which one is the core? And so 6 through 10, there's even poignant moments, actually, among it. Of course, we have John DiMaggio's voice as King Zog, and he is my favorite character in this. Tia Beanie's all right. She's the hero. It's funny. Especially the first couple episodes are overly worried about doing gross out gags and about alcohol-related jokes. Once they get past that, it gets really good. And I would say there's a couple of funny moments in those first 5 episodes. But if you really want to have a really funny, good time, just start at 6. And I think you'll do well there. Tell me what you think. Please, in the comments on Facebook or my email, remember, I'm at pete@happy-warrior.net. And just tell me what you think of Disenchantment and this episode. So let's move forward. So a poll came out from Gallup, this is August 13th when it came out, that showed that Democrats have a more positive view of socialism than they do capitalism, which is really scary. So here it is. So 47% positively view capitalism versus 57% positively view socialism. This seems insane to me, but it makes sense as Americans, particularly younger Americans, buy into this. You know, if you look at the positive views of capitalism, the older they are, the more likely they are to feel happy about capitalism. The younger they are, the more positive they're probably going to look at socialism. And my generation and younger are, frankly, we're idiots. We do not read news. We do not spend enough time researching and doing thorough reasoning and research. We're kind of lazy. We kind of been fed all this awesome digital stuff, and it's made us a tad lazy. I know I'm a tad lazy. This is insane when I look at some of the stories coming out of Venezuela and other parts of South America. Venezuela, as some of you may know, is having a famine right now. The government is crashing pretty strongly. There are no animals left in the zoo. They've been eaten. There are gangs of children that fight over trash cans. They have millions. I told you, millions in the last 2 years have left Venezuela to neighboring countries, including Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Brazil, and others. It's pretty intense what's going on right now. This can fully be blamed on socialism. You know, socialism didn't work ever, but it got by, it limped on when they had lots of oil money. Venezuela has the richest resources of oil in the known world. They capitalized on that, and so they could pretend that their government was making everything fine and people are basically surviving. They weren't thriving, but the government was limping on. But when oil went down, when their leader passed away, their great leader passed away, and they got a new one. The new guy's Maduro. The last guy was Chavez. Everything's gone to heck in a basket. And it's all falling apart. And that is due to socialism. It did the socialism thing. Like I talked about China, Soviet Union, Vietnam, Cambodia, Romania, other parts of the Soviet satellite countries. It's proven that breaks time and again. Nicaragua. It's getting worse. They say that because of the fall of Venezuela, it's starting to pull the other ones around it down. It's scary what it could be doing. Nicaragua, I just mentioned. Bolivia. They're worried that these countries are going to follow what Venezuela is doing right now. And they're going to have a lot of the similar problems. It's scary. It really is scary if you live in Venezuela and South America. I've been reading articles that say maybe this will even take down Brazil, because Brazil used to have a dictatorship 40-some years ago, and they're having issues with their president they just had their president be essentially impeached and is in jail, and now she's planning even maybe of running again. I mean, it's a mess. It's a mess in Brazil. In a lot of these countries where they had dictatorships, where they had some form of Marxism, it did not turn out well. It did not turn out well at all. Now, this is crazy to me. See, here's one of the things that you'll hear. Alexandria Cortez and others are saying that, well, we just want to be like democratic socialism. We want to be like democratic socialism because that's totally different. Now, if you ask her, Alexandria Cortez, actually, if you can ask most people this, what's the difference between socialism and democratic socialism? Now, and I've struggled this too, to even say, nope, I don't know. They're different because they're different. It's painful. It's way different. So I'm going to interview this guy that wrote this incredible essay in Quillette. That's a magazine you all must read. It's called Democrat Socialism is a Scam. Giancarlo Sopo is a Democrat. His wife is from Cuba. He's visited Cuba. He has campaigned for Democrats. He's a communications person for profession, but he wrote this amazing essay, and it's like, people, guys, this is a bait and switch scam. Like, these are totally different things. So Democrat socialism is what we see in our Nordic countries. It sounds phonetically similar. That's his quote, phonetically similar. But this is more than a misnomer. The ideology and policies of Democrat Socialist America, which include an end to profits democratizing the means of production, are much more like those of Havana and Caracas than Helsinki and Copenhagen. Norway has a huge amount of capitalism, a huge amount of free enterprise. They are explicitly different. In fact, in some ways, Norway and these democrat socialist countries in Europe, their economies are more free. The social democrats of the Nordic countries are almost entirely different than the social democrats we're being told we have to, I should call them democrat socialists. The democrat socialists Way different, totally different way to go. Maybe once upon a time they had similar roots, but they went in completely opposite directions. I like this bit here. In Venezuela, the late Hugo Chavez both identified as a Democrat socialist and governed like one. Unlike in Scandinavia, where state-owned enterprises are largely independent, profit-pursuing ventures, and property rights are sacrosanct. Remember, a huge part of Marxism is about property rights. You know, the proletariat can just give and take where they want to. The Chavez confiscated private assets and not only nationalized major industries, he ran them. For example, when workers of oil PDVSA refused to embrace his policies, he fired and replaced them with unqualified cronies, including his cousin, in a move that accelerated the oil-dependent nature's demise. Later on in his essay, he said, "Why should Americans trust that America's socialists should be any more willing to relinquish power than their ideological brethren in Latin America and across the world? Indeed, it is odd that those who argue President Trump has authoritarian tendencies are often the same people who want to give the federal government even more power over our economy." Like I said, this guy's a Democrat. He says, to be clear, Latin America's misfortunes are no excuse for inaction on healthcare and education at home, but they should help make us more scrupulous consumers of politics. Just as my family and most Americans are wise to dismiss the socialist slurs against President Obama, Democrats should be wary of those who assure us that Democrat socialism will make us more like Europe. As millions of Latinos will tell you, it won't. You know, and I'd add to that, there's another article by Giancarlo Sopo in The Federalist. That's another pretty good online magazine you should read. The title says it all. Debunking Socialist Myths. 90% of Scandinavia's wealth is privately owned. I mean, that alone should tell you that that is a huge difference between the social Democrats and the Democrat socials. And we should keep in mind that a big part of the reason why Marxism doesn't work is the reason why government often fails. Because people are stupid. And government is made of people. And they make big mistakes. And unlike in private industry and your own personal life, there are direct consequences and you have to answer for them right away. But government doesn't have to do that. They can hide it. They can crush the truth. They can keep it away. They can never see justice. We never saw justice for the EPA screwing up that mine disaster that happened 2 years ago. And I already read you the story about the emails with Weiner and Hillary Clinton's email server. I mean, the government is so ineffective, so bad at their job. Here's a great story. You'll love this. This should be in many more places than just the one place, and I'm surprised I even found it. So the opioid crisis is largely because illegal fentanyl is being put in drugs, and recreational drug users are taking it. It's not because of prescription opioids. I have another article that will prove it 10 times till Friday. No, it's because fentanyl. Usually it's a synthetic called carfentanil, which is used mostly on horses. It's like 1,000 times more powerful than human fentanyl. Well, because of this, the people that make carfentanil legally, the legal ones that make it for vets, they no longer can sell it. They said they voluntarily surrendered approval for the drug in March because of growing signs it was being diverted. Carfentanil, now there's nothing here to prove it was being diverted, but still. Carfentanil is so potent it was used by veterinarians as an anesthetic on elephants. So here's what happened. The government basically makes this maker say you can't sell carfentanil anymore because maybe people are using it. With few options to choose from, some veterinarians are legally prescribing tramadol and other opioids intended for humans to relieve pain in pets. The FDA is recommending veterinarians use alternatives to opioids whenever possible to look for signs of opioid abuse by pet owners and their own employees. This craziness from the CDC has gone so crazy, they're denying our pets, our dogs, our horses, our animals, effective pain care. I mean, that should be everywhere. I mean, that should say how ineffective, how stupid our government is. How governments really, they do not have much pushback from the people. If there is any pushback, it doesn't go anywhere. There was earlier this year, they wanted an open hearing. The FDA and the CDC wanted an open hearing where pain patients could speak about how the opioid crisis, how the CDC 2016 guidelines have affected us. I mean, thousands upon thousands of people showed up, wrote letters, gave testimony, put things on their internet forum, including myself. I couldn't get there physically, but I did post stuff. And that same day afterwards, it meant nothing. Because that same day afterwards, before they released a thing on the forum, they released their plans. It was a mistake. It was oops. Basically, it showed that CDC director and the FDA, Scott Gottlieb, didn't really care. Nothing at that forum meant anything to them. They still believe that opioids from people who are legally prescribed them are being used by drug users and causing drug overdoses, even though the number of prescriptions have gone down, but the amount of deaths have gone up. It is illegal opioids, but the government doesn't care. The government doesn't listen. Governments are ineffective. It's crazy to me that the people that have screwed up so badly that they are denying my dog any pain care when he is sick. I have a husky that's 15 years old, and he only gets a little bit of a pain pill at night. He probably isn't going to be with us much longer. Laser, he's my friend, my buddy. He's being denied basically effective pain care partly because of this. Isn't that crazy? It's one thing to deny pain care for people, which I feel is immoral, but to deny it to pets because what their owners might take it, that's cuckoo. I mean, that's nuts. That's just crazy talk. Why in the world would you ever trust those people to manage property rights better, to manage who gets what and how much? How would you think that they can deal with healthcare? I mean, it's obviously proven that the little bit of healthcare control they have, they've used terribly and mismanaged completely. And this isn't a Democrat versus Republican issue. The VA is still a mess. It was a mess when Obama was in charge and forced these guidelines and has caused hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of veterans to kill themselves or to self-destruct. That was bad enough, but it hasn't gotten much better on the Trump administration. So it's not a Republican-Democrat thing. It's that government sucks. They are bad at what they do. But in spite of all this ample evidence that the government is terrible, anything they touch, it doesn't turn to gold. It goes the other one. Everything they touch is corrupted. I mean, student loans, the cost of going to college in the United States is evident of this. The government tried to make it cheaper. What happened? It got more expensive. When they tried to help the New Society with Lyndon Johnson, when they tried to help blacks, did it help blacks? No. The statistics for families, for poverty, everything stayed there or got worse. And actually, praise to President Trump, because we're seeing the highest black entrepreneurship in decades right now. And the highest employment of blacks, same thing. So, give President Trump credit where credit is due. But why in the world, with all of this going on, do you want to trust government? That's what I don't understand. I think it's because my generation, I think people largely today are morons that don't pay attention. And I have this video from Prager University that proves my point.
What's up, guys? This is Will Witt from PragerU. Today we're in beautiful Santa Barbara, and we're going to be asking people about plastic straws and should they be banned. Should plastic straws be banned?
Hell yeah, they should.
Should we ban plastic straws?
Absolutely.
Do you think we should ban plastic straws?
I do.
Why do you think that?
Because they're bad for the environment and they cause a lot of pollution. They kill the baby sea turtles.
What else should we ban to help save the environment?
Oh my goodness. Come up with a better idea for like plastic lids on to-go cups and...
Paper lids.
Paper lids would be great.
What do you guys do to help eliminate your carbon footprint?
Recycle.
Wow. Heartwarming. What else could we do to help fix the environment?
I think, what I've been seeing in different places, people have just been planting fruit trees in public streets, and that's dope.
In the ocean, if you
this is the best part.
I saw an article about this, and all that's inside them are plastic straws.
Should businesses be able to choose whether or not to use plastic, or should the government just tell them they can't use it?
I think the government should tell them we should stop using plastic.
Think about it, people could eat fruit for free, planted by the state, trees planted by the state, they could eat fruit, homeless people could eat fruit, and it's giving oxygen into the air.
So the government pays for the fruit trees?
Sure, why not?
And what do you think's worse? Plastic straws here, or people coming into this country illegally?
Oh my god, plastic straws!
Oh my
That isn't all. Yes!
Okay. What do you think is the best alternative to plastic straws?
Well, the place that I work, we started using paper straws, and a lot of people have an issue with paper straws because they're
soggy.
Soggy.
What do you think is a bigger priority to stop? Plastic straws or illegal immigration?
A bigger priority? I would say straws.
Okay, so putting aside putting aside that two of them said that plastic straws are a worse problem, something we should put higher prioritization on than illegal immigration. Putting that aside, The comment that she read an article, and in the article it showed a fish, and they cut the fish open, and it was only filled with plastic straws. Oh man, I've been waiting so long. I've been wanting to share that for so long. That is one of my favorite clips. I wish I could get Robert to get me like a soundboard, and then we'd save that one, and then we'd put it there. I mean, man, it's scary. Is that scary, the lack of thinking? I mean, to think our ancestors, the things that they looked at when World War II was going on, the evils of Hitler, and to think how we've degenerated. Our priorities now are plastic straws. I don't care if it's in the leftist city of Leftville. That's still crazy. I mean, how do you think our society can function healthily? How do you think we can manage our institutions, private and public, if we're morons? All right, so here's another story about a moron. An Oregon woman finds cougar in living room, says telepathy helped her get it out. Yes, this is true. She said she relied on frequency and attunement, feline speak eye blinking, and telepathy to calm the animal, safely got it out after it took a 6-hour nap behind the couch. Oh my gosh, that is an awesome story. And she has pictures! Oh, they're great! Oh, wow. That is fantastic. Yeah, we're doomed. We're doomed. It's over. We're doomed. All right, so I have a little bit more to share with you. This is another video. It's by a comedian that works for Reason. His name is Remy. He does musical parodies, kind of like Weird Al, but they're from a libertarian perspective. They are awesome. This next one I'm going to share with you, I think it's pretty accurate in what's wrong with our media today. As someone that's media major, that someone's got a master's in journalism, this is hilarious, spot on, dead on. If you're like me, you're going to love this. Here we go.
Franken says if he was still in the Senate, he'd press Kavanaugh in 2 key areas. I bet he would. Thanks, Ed. Our top story tonight, the president's tweeting will dispel the silly notion we're deliberately misleading. Plus, people are outraged at Starbucks Holiday Cup. We'll have the fiery backlash as the program picks up. Huh. Who's outraged? The world is embittered. No, really, who's outraged? 2 people on Twitter. Look, we want to disprove the president's tweets. Maybe no holiday cups. I see what you mean. So again, our top story, enemy of the people? Trump's ridiculous claims that we view you as sheep. Plus, people are outraged at Starbucks Unity Cup. See, that's not what I meant. And why some are fed up. 72% of people think what we do is misleading. Isn't playing up an outrage just a bit self-defeating? I know that we've honed in on what's good for ratings, but enough with the cups. I understand what you're saying. Deadly protests in Nicaragua with Ortega in charge. What the latest crackdown means for the region at large. Plus, people are outraged at Starbucks' new mug. The not furious backlash specifically from this frightful joke. Again, our top story, a White House deranged, CNN's Jim Acosta in a testy exchange. And so we don't lose your trust, we'll sit silent, alone, and go straight to an eyewitness live on the phone. Well, Jim Acosta asked a question right at the start. It was a very good question, really quite smart. Some here said he had a knack for unmasking imposters. And your name for the record? Jim Acosta. And finally, we leave on a note that is somber. As noun, verb, outrage. The template's in the prompter. Preposition Starbucks. Adjective, noun. Preposition, verb, backlash. Preposition, pronoun.
Oh, that is Remy. You can find him on YouTube. Just type in Remy or Remy Reason. It's so funny. That one is just dead on about the outrage problem. All right, I'd like to end today's episode on a different note. Senator John McCain passed away just recently, yesterday, I think. Senator John McCain is someone that has been in the Republican movement, in the public consciousness, political public consciousness for a long time now. To my family, to my grandpa specifically, he served in the Air Force during the Vietnam conflict. In many different ways. He worked at the Pentagon. He worked as a missile man in the Air Force. He was an Air Force officer. John McCain is a hero. If you know what John McCain and the other Vietnam American prisoners of war went through, there is no way that you can say anything but. Now, I know John McCain as a politician. I disagree with him. Trump has decided to not honor him maybe as best as he should because of things that John McCain said about Trump and political stuff. I know that. John McCain is not my political hero. I'm not a huge John McCain fan. I disagree with John McCain as often as I agree with him. But what John McCain went through and how John McCain dealt with his day-to-day with the incredible pain. John McCain had terrible chronic pain for the rest of his life because of what he went through in Vietnam. Here, I'm just going to play a video. This was part of a propaganda video it's one of the few videos we have of John McCain when he was a prisoner of war. I'm just going to play it, and you have to tell me if you can hold back the tears, because I can't.
I would just like to tell my wife.
Je voudrais seulement dire à ma femme
I'll get well.
que j'irai bien,
I love her.
que je l'aime.
I hope to see her soon.
J'espère la revoir bientôt.
I appreciate it if you tell her that. That's all.
C'est tout.
I'm sure that I will get well.
Je suis sûr que j'irai mieux.
That's all I have.
So here's a little bit about John McCain. When he was, and this is the Vietnamese conflict, in 1967, he was 31. He was a Navy pilot. His aircraft crashed. He was ejected by the force of this crash. Ejected out. It broke his right leg, broke both arms, knocked him unconscious. He was then endured 5.5 years of brutal torture. He was given very little to no medical treatment for those injuries, by the way, and he was placed in solitary confinement, which were these windowless 10 by 10 foot rooms. John McCain was actually offered to go home because his father became a U.S. admiral in the Navy during the Vietnam conflict. And so they offered to have John McCain go home. John McCain knew that if he did this would be a propaganda victory. He would get a release from the hell he was in, but it could be used against the soldiers that were still fighting against his fellow POWs. He said no. Here's the thing. Okay, so after he said this, the torture got worse. He said, for the next 4 days, I was beaten every 2 or 3 hours by different guards. My left arm was broken again, and my ribs were cracked. There's a great part about his self-account I love here. He says, I was finding that prayer helped. It wasn't a question of asking for superhuman strength or for God to strike the North Vietnamese dead. It was asking for moral and physical courage, for guidance and wisdom to do the right thing. I asked for comfort when I was in pain, and sometimes I received relief. I was sustained in many times of trial. There are some parts of this account that are too crazy to talk about thumbnails being peeled back, burned with cigarettes, bamboo being grown into people. I mean, sadistic stuff that's too crazy that I will share here. But I would recommend, there's an article in the outline, says usnews.com, news articles. It's John McCain's personal narrative of what he went through while a POW in Vietnam. I really want you guys to all go out and read it if you have the time. It probably will take you 10 to 15 minutes to read it, but it's worth it. Okay, so I'm just going to read the end of it. The North Vietnamese gave us very little except bad news about the U.S. What I'm reading here today, by the way, I think really applies today. The North Vietnamese gave us very little except bad news about the U.S. We didn't find out about the first successful moonshot in 1969 until it was mentioned in a speech by George McGovern saying that Nixon could put a man on the moon, but he couldn't put an end to the Vietnam War. They bombarded us with news of Martin Luther King's death and the riots that followed. Information like that poured continuously out of the loudspeakers. I think America is a better country now because we have been through a sort of purging process, a reevaluation of ourselves. Now I see more of an appreciation of our way of life. There is more patriotism. The flag is all over the place. I hear new values being stressed. The concern for environment is a case in point. I've received scores of letters from young people, and many of them sent me POW bracelets with my name on it, which they had been wearing. Some were not too sure about the war, but they are strongly patriotic. Their values are good, and I think we will find that they are going to grow up to be better Americans than many of us. This outpouring on behalf of those who are prisoners of war is staggering and a little embarrassing because basically we feel that we are just average American Navy, Marine, and Air Force pilots who got shot down. Anybody else in our place would perform just as well. My own plans for the future are to remain in the Navy. If I am able to return to flying staffs, that depends upon whether the corrective surgery on my arms and legs is successful. If I have to leave the Navy, I hope to serve the government in some capacity, preferably in foreign service to the State Department. I had a lot to think over there. I came to the conclusion that one of the most important things in life, along with a man's family, is to make some contribution to his country. Thank you, John McCain, for your service to the country as a pilot, for your service to the country as a senator, for the good example you set for when you ran for president in 2008. Thank you very much for that good example. I'm praying for your family that they might be comforted in this tough time. I had a friend that made fun of John McCain and the way he moved when I was a high school senior. And I had to point out, he moves like that, not because he's an old man, but because he had both his legs and arms broken, and they never healed right. And so it kind of left him a bit waddled. John McCain is an inspiration in so many good ways. And while we don't always agree on politics, we can agree that John McCain is a hero. Thank you, Mr. McCain, Senator McCain, for your service. Well, this has been the Happy Warrior program. I'm your host, Peter. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me today. Please share your comments, questions, stories, ideas with me at Pete at happy-warrior.net, Pete at happy-warrior.net. Thank you so much. God bless America. God bless our servicemen and military. Thank you for all you do for us. And thank you for the good men and women of this country that just make it so awesome and great. All right. Until next time, goodbye.
Thank you for listening. The Happy Warrior Podcast, hosted by Peter Vaughn Pischke, produced by Robert Mehling, a production of the Sioux Empire Podcast Network. Learn more at happy-warrior.net.
A production of the SiouxEmpire.com.